Next up is actually one of my favorite people. So Stacey Nevel and I have worked together for 9 some odd years, but it's been off and on. She was a competitor. She was a sister of mine, then she was a competitor, then we got acquired and she's a sister again. So it's amazing how we all come full circle. Stacey's been doing this for roughly 18 years now in the market research or loyalty space, if you will. And the whole focus of this presentation is my personal favorite. So it's how to harness the voice of the customer, how to take that program and bring it to the next level. So without any further ado, Stacey. Nice job.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Sorry, I'm trying to make sure I don't press the wrong buttons. So here at Confirmit, we have the enviable position of being able to work with some great clients. And that gives us the opportunity to do a couple things. So it gives us a chance to, one, learn from our clients about what they're doing with their programs. We learn a lot about different programs at different stages, and we're able to see why some programs are a little bit more successful than others. We also get to learn about what's going on in the marketplace and what's coming next, which is a lot of fun. So today, we're going to talk to you a little bit. I'm going to talk to you about the next half an hour or so about basically some building blocks to put together a great, solid voice of the customer program, as well as what we kind of see coming next in the next 12 months or so. So, without further ado, for us, VoC programs often start with feedback. And feedback is like a single drop of water very often. It's clear, simple, relatively easy to understand. But the question is, how often do we only see one drop of water? Very often, we see great volumes of water. You know, as I come from the East Coast, so a lot of us from the East Coast can attest to after Hurricane Sandy, we see huge volumes of water that cause minor complications and issues in our lives. So we may see this, devastating our communities, or this, devastating our personal lives. This honestly could have been me about a year ago. So, twice, in fact, last year. So, what do we do when this happens to us? How do we take this volume of data, this volume of water that has come into our lives, and harness that to be able to get good energy from it? Often, we're left with unwieldy programs like water infecting our world. And we're engulfed by the data, and we end up with a reactive effort. So how do we use our VoC programs to focus and harness the power that is within that data to drive action through our organizations? So all this talk about wild water got me thinking about the Hoover Dam. Huge structure there to contain water, right? Take a quick look.
The Hoover Dam, one of America's most famous landmarks. Completed in 1935, it was the most colossal structure the modern world had ever seen. Not only was it the world's heaviest and tallest dam, it was also the largest producer of hydroelectric power. The Hoover Dam became an instant attraction and a monument to the sheer determination and courage of the 21,000 men who built it.
So the Hoover Dam started out as the brainchild of Herbert Hoover. However, he was the project sponsor for the most part. The real vision came from Frank Crowe, who basically acted as the program manager of that program. Building the dam, it was his vision that basically sought to accomplish 3 things. He wanted to help provide a structure to control the floods. He wanted to be able to generate energy from the water that was coming into the basin. And he wanted to be able to provide the community with a little bit of recreation. So what we're going to talk about today is how we use your VoC program, how we structure that 2, provide a structure to control the floods of data that you're seeing in your organization. Harness that data to provide energy and drive energy throughout your organization. Go viral, if you will. And how we drive engagement with that information, maybe through a little bit of recreation and fun. So let's focus on structure to control the floods of data that we see. So one of the first things we want to do, we want to make sure that we're aligning our data within the organization. We've heard some talk earlier today and even just now about making sure that we get alignment with our executives, right? We want to align our goals, make sure that we're setting our goals that to match our business goals, our business objectives. So often we hear people set goals for the Voice of the Customer programs that look like, I want to improve my loyalty metric by a certain percentage. We'll pick on overall satisfaction. I want to improve overall satisfaction by 10%. But often this doesn't resonate within the organizations because it's not something that they have a clear line of sight to. It's not something that they can easily understand how to impact. What we would rather do is look at the why behind how you align your goals, the why behind that increase per 10%. We often do this through the three main goals we often see are within revenue, cost, and of course culture, possibly the ability to change the culture within the organization. There are several ways that we look to do that. Just to bring this a little bit home for you, often we are able to help us align with some of those. So your feedback data, linkages to your financial data, your behavioral data, we may be able to help when we design our programs to accomplish those goals. For example, we'll pick on revenue. We want to bring new customers in. Well, perhaps that looks like engaging non-customers in a word of mouth, or engaging customers in a word of mouth campaign to bring in new customers. Perhaps we want to reduce churn, and we're going to talk about this a little bit in a few more slides. We want to reduce churn. Well, let's focus on a program where we really dig into the alert system and the process that we have to solve issues for our most critical customers, keep them from walking out of the door. Or perhaps we want to affect cross-sell. Maybe we want to improve cross-sell. Well, for that, maybe we go target our happiest customers, our promoters, if you will, and find new, appropriate products to sell them, because they're the ones who are our 1%. So we also want to make sure that we're building a very strong, effective structure, something that's going to withstand the test of time. So, interestingly, Frank Crow employed circus workers to start building the dam, to walk on the ropes and walk on the highest of heights. So when I was thinking about this, I was thinking that maybe we don't need to be circus performers to be able to build a Voice of the Customer program. But I think most of us that have built a program can admit that the ability to juggle would really not go in as a skill that we wouldn't need. One of the first things you want to do when you begin to build your structure is understand your audience. And that audience is not just comprised, as we heard earlier today from Jason Galvin, it's not just comprised of our customers. It's also going to bring in our employees, as well as our partners. In some cases, agents, other partner location individuals. Once we understand our audiences, we want to look at the customer journey, or the journey of those constituents that I just mentioned. So within that journey, what are the steps they're taking? Where are our critical points? And once we understand the journey, we want to understand the channels, the best ways to communicate with them, and to get information back from them. So once we've got all this in place, it will allow us to talk about how to manage the sources of data and resources that are within our organization. So we have a lot of industry knowledge when it comes to collecting Voice of the Customer data. Generally speaking, Voice of the Customer data has historically been structured, direct. We as an industry are pretty good at collecting that level of data, housing that, potentially even reporting on it, and taking action from it. But one of the trends that we've seen lately among our clients is the use of indirect data. And by indirect data, I don't just mean social media. I know a lot of people go there when I say indirect data, and don't get me wrong, social media data is important, it's vital. But we all have a wealth of indirect data that currently comes into our organizations by way of emails, phone calls, complaint calls. And then often we're not utilizing that data and marrying that back to our voice of the customer data because it remains in the silos that it basically entered the organization in. So what we want to do is help provide a platform through our VoC program that allows us to marry that data and use it side by side. Also within Voice of the Customer, we want to make sure that we're looking at the hierarchy within our organization and we're getting data to and from people at the levels that they sit in within the organization and throughout the organization. So another audience that we have, or another source of data, would be voice of market. So often this is benchmark data or brand trackers, information that we use very well in marketing, advertising, product development. But again, a lot of the times that data will sit in that silo. We won't bring that into some kind of integrated format to work alongside of our voice of the customer data. We may even have financial voice of the business data. So this also deals with integration, but this is where we want to integrate the financials, the behavioral data, with our voice of the customer data and make sure that we are listening to all of that data together and integrating what we already know about our customers. So kind of to yours and Greg's point about big data, we want to make sure we don't have to ask those questions. We've already got that in-house. Lastly, we have voice of the employee data. And another concept that was talked about a little earlier is we as an industry pretty much understand there's a great linkage between voice of the employee and voice of the customer. We all generally understand that, accept it. But what we don't see often is the use and practice of that linkage in a very methodical way. So that is something that still stands as an opportunity for us. In addition, another trend that we are encouraging with our customers is collecting voice of the customer data through the employee. We have a few clients that are actually doing this. We've talked about it with several others. I know our friends at Best Buy are currently doing this, but it often is a way to gather insights and be able to do a gap analysis on what's going on within your organization and those different touch points. What we have here is an example of a customer journey told from two different perspectives. So we've got a perspective from the customer perspective at the top and from the employee perspective at the bottom. And you can see that there are some disconnects. If you do that side-by-side gap analysis, there's a definite disconnect between the customer's view of, say, what's going on in the sales channel, as well as the employee view. We've got it going on again in product quality. So in this case, the customers perceive the service that they're getting to be lower than the employees perceive it. So this in and of itself is an area for coaching. It's an area for opportunity. Obviously, we need to get our employees up to speed in understanding what the actual customer perception is. Similarly, we see that there's a gap within the billing process where our customers perceive it as better than our employees do. What this is basically telling us is that our customers are not feeling the pain of this yet. However, our employees know that the process is broken. So here we have an opportunity to fix the problem before our customers feel that pain. So what we want to do to manage all the sources of data is bring it all together, basically, and do something with it. So next I want to focus a little bit on the next step in harnessing the data, basically generating that energy from your data. How do you pull the energy out, spread that through your organization? So when we talk about harnessing the energy, there are turbines that are underneath the Hoover Dam that produce energy. But without dealing with the turbines so much, what is it they're doing? What is it they're producing? They're producing light and energy, something that's useful and powerful for the communities that surround it. So we want to help provide the same thing through tailored insights that we're going to use to drive change within our organizations and demonstrate a value to the business. In other words, provide something powerful and useful. So within the first concept here, tailored insights, how are we going to do that? Well, we want to go out and make sure that we're talking to the right people in our organization at every level. So talk to your executives, make sure we're sharing information from our programs with our executives, our management staff, frontline staff, support staff. We also want to make sure that we're delivering the proper reports at the right levels. So is it push reporting? Is it logging on? Is it a dashboard? Is it deep dive analysis? And then there's the how. How are we going to get this information in their hands? So how do we make sure that we give dashboard availability at the proper level to the right person? How do we make sure that we're providing push reports to those who, because they're in a field, they can't log on, or perhaps maybe, like we talked about a little while ago, they just don't want to provide that information and that data? How do we make sure that we are providing service level alerts that get to the account manager or the stakeholder within the organization who can then forward that information on to the necessary team? And how do we make sure that we're also collecting product level alerts or verbatim analysis that's going to enable product enhancements and future customer experience insights? So with all these various forms of reporting, and the one that wasn't captured there is probably data feeds, where maybe you're pushing information from your system back into your internal CRM systems. But with all this data, of course, there are pros and cons to each one, right? We're not going to go through all of these in depth. You're going to be able to see this in a copy of the presentation later. But the point is, make sure you know your audience and that you're delivering the data as they need it and at the level at which they need it. So once we've got all that out of the way, we also want to make sure that we're using this data to drive action through our organizations. So again, very many of us are already using an alert process to target and act on data. So we have the tactical use of the data down. Insights come in, alerts go out to the field, and we're solving problems for customers through those alerts. The next thing to do is to make sure we're also collecting and acting on issues strategically. So do we have a strategic action planning process in place? And are we tracking that? Both tactically and strategically, tracking those actions and being able to deliver some high-level reports on what kinds of issues we see coming into our organization. Actually had an example of a client I worked with about 2 years ago, a medical device organization that she said she used to always complain that she felt like all she did in her program was track down her sales team to understand what they're doing from an action management perspective. She felt that was her entire job. Once she got the program up and running, that was all she was doing. And about 6 months later, we worked together to put together a process and a cadence. And about 6 months later, we realized that she was able to make that a piece of her job as opposed to the entire job, because we were able to put a system in place where she was managing the program, managing the actions centrally, but driving change locally. So you want to make sure we're pushing the actual change out to the local areas that it needs to be in, those who actually affect the change and touch the customer. So we've got all that in place, and now we need to demonstrate value to the business. Our program is up and running, we're delivering insights, and people are making changes. So how do we basically show the business the money? How do we show them what they're getting for the investment that they've made? And what we've got here is an example of the Confirmit ROI model. It's a model that we have built to help our clients look at what they're getting out of their program. So we'll put in some basic information, we'll put in some basic company vitals, size, revenue, number of customers, and we have some ways of looking at initiatives or business objectives that you may undertake. In this case, we've got an organization that's undertaking some revenue-driving business objectives. and how they can impact your business in a given time period. So in this example, the client that was working in this one was looking to make some basic changes, starting off with reducing churn. So currently, their churn rate is 8%. They want to reduce it by 10%. And we can see that that change, given their company statistics, would result in about an $800,000 savings, or basically that's what's going to stay in-house by customers they already have staying. We're going to reduce defections. They had a secondary goal of increasing wallet share. And they weren't going to be too ambitious. They decided to increase the wallet share basically among their happiest customers, their promoters. And it was a modest change, but that was going to bring them an additional $400,000. So basically they were able to come back and say the ROI from my VoC program for this time period is about $1.2 million. So the last piece of driving, of harnessing the value of your program is being able to drive engagement throughout your organization. So how do we do that? We want to make sure, as Frank Crowe set out to do, that we provide a little recreational amenity with our programs throughout our organizations. So start off by branding your program. Give it a name. This is the newest member of your corporate team. Name it. And now that you've got a personality, give it a slogan or a tagline. Give it a catchphrase. Make it personal. And use all of that to engage your team. Create videos, collateral. Engage your team in the process of voice of the customer. Here we have some examples of some companies that have used this well. The top, Procter & Gamble and Mountain Dew, this is actually their external view. So they've branded both internally and externally. And this is their external view and how they collect feedback from their customers. And the two at the bottom, they've actually decided to keep their branding in-house. So Linden and Symantec, but they are still using a great communication tool, products, collateral to get their program known. So I'm actually going to pick on Linden for a little while. Linden is, has anyone heard of Linden? It's a freight shipping company based out of Alaska and Washington State. And basically, they not only gave their program a brand, they gave it a face. This is Larry Linden you're looking at. He is, this is the bobblehead of Larry Linden. And they have branded him completely with catchphrases, slogans, obviously bobbleheads, other collateral, t-shirts, mugs, and so much so, throughout their organization, they have, throughout their organization, they often hear people in meetings saying, Larry Linden says, sure, we can do that. That's how viral they have taken this through their organization. In addition, you've got the opportunity to celebrate achievements within your organization. So this is an example of a client who celebrates achievements in process improvement and product improvement with the Aviva Customer Cup, which is an internal competition, team-based competition that attempts to look at product and process improvements so teams will compete and the best one gets the Customer Cup, which must be a wonderful way to build engagement, a wonderful way to basically push strategic initiatives and strategic change throughout your organization while giving people the recognition that they deserve. And finally, we want to make sure that we're engaging respondents in our process. I mean, if we think about it, we're all competing for basically the same resource. We're all competing, for the most part, for the same customers and their time to give us feedback. Solicited, unsolicited, we all are butting up against the same time constraints. So what we need to do, obviously with streamlining surveys, making sure we're asking only what we need to ask, we also want to make sure that it's engaging and it's fun and it's something that people want to do for us. So to the extent possible, and still being methodologically sound, we want to maybe not ask all radio button questions, right? So we've actually covered a lot of information in a relatively short amount of time. But what I want to leave you with is basically what we need to do is use the structure of our Voice of the Customer programs to control and drive energy through our organization and make sure that we're having a little bit of fun along the way. So as you look at the next few images, what I'd like you to think about is the flow of data coming into your Voice of the Customer dam. Thank you. We have about 4 minutes and 13 seconds. Do we have any questions? Yes. Give the mic.
Original Chapman Sanders, by the way, that was a fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
I'd just like to have one question about how do we leverage the Voice of Customer program with all this data that we're bringing in, specifically around our CRM, that right now the systems are separate. There seems to be some sort of a push sort of bring either CRM data into this data warehouse or vice versa, so that you can see the voice of the business along with the voice of the customer all in one view. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think there are lots of ways to do that. We can, of course, and lots of organizations out there can do CRM integrations where we're pulling data in directly into, say, a hub or the survey that we're planning to send out. There's also the old-fashioned way of doing things, which is including it in your upload variables, just so we are able to present that data, offer that segmentation. But I think it's definitely something we should be doing. To my point about bringing in the voice of the business, those financials and behavioral data, that is going to make our data richer, stronger, allow for segmentation. And again, we have a number of companies that actually are pushing that data, so the NPS score or an overall satisfaction score, back into their CRM systems or into Salesforce or something like that, so that they can, at that glance, their sales folks or their field can see that information. So where possible, I say definitely use it. Any other questions? Yes.
One more over here.
Up front.
That was terrific. I'm curious about the ROI model that you showed. Could you give us a sense for the range of, percent you guys typically see?
The range for percent
The
of
ROI, return on investment, the model for?
Well, it would all depend on the size of the organization and what we're trying to accomplish. So I don't think I understand what you mean by range.
The bigger the organization, the better, typically?
If they're actually bringing about change, yes.
They do it right, okay.
So, yes, the base of that is obviously that you have to be working on change within your organization. So we can predict anything. We can say, if you do this, you will get this. The question is, are you going to do that? And was the information that we put into the model good? So if the information is good, and we're actually working on the behaviors, and we're offering through our analytics, through key driver analysis, through correlations, ways that you can actually change your scores in your data, or ways that you can increase the value of your recommendations, then yes, we'll see great data. And obviously the more you have to work with, or the better your margins, the bigger we'll see.